This one. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is GiBi. Welcome to a brief, calm discussion. This is our second episode. I explained it last time, but I'm going to be explaining again. This is a show in which we are going to talk, have discussions, analyze, but not debate or argue. That is the purpose of the show. Last week I talked to Withered Circle for the pro Tales Games perspective, and now I have on with me ID's Fantasy.
Hello.
So, first question is going to be, how long have you had your channel? What's your experience with FNAF? How long have you been following the franchise? Just a general introduction.
Alright, so I've been a FNAF YouTuber for about as long as I've been a fan of the franchise. I started doing FNAF theories about 3 years ago in February. And I got into FNAF with Security Breach when it came out. I binged the entire lore over the course of like 4 months, and have been doing this ever since. Was there any part of the question I didn't answer?
So you got interested in the franchise and the lore around the same point?
Yes.
All right, because a lot of people, I'm considerably older than most of the other FNAF theorists, but a lot of people were like, I grew up watching MatPat, and then they like.
I mean, I grew up watching MatPat,
Yeah.
but I didn't care for the FNAF stuff because my first exposure to Five Nights at Freddy's was like at the school I went to in like middle school or whatever. All of the kids before school started, when we got off the bus, we would all just be in the gymnasium until like 10 minutes before the bell, and then we were released into the rest of the school. And people would have their various devices and be playing video games in the lines. And so that was the first time I ever heard about Five Nights at Freddy's, I think. And my first exposure was hearing that it had dead kids' bodies stuffed in animatronic suits, and I was incredibly disturbed. Um, and then it was just jump scares, and I'd heard some other stuff that was incorrect about it, but it gave me some negative impressions of it, so I didn't pay any attention at all. I might have watched a couple game theories just out of morbid curiosity, but didn't really have interest until Security Breach actually came out.
Do you think that the Security Breach marketing worked on you? Like, you're like, oh, this game looks interesting, or was it just like all the hype surrounding the release of the game?
Well, what happened was MatPat did his stream reacting to the final Security Breach trailer, and I'm like, wait a second. It's not just jump scares? There's actual, like, story in the main game, and not, like, weird stuff yet, just have to interpret, and so that's what I'm like, I can, stuttering, yes, I can look into this, and it'll be interesting.
And then you got hooked.
Yup. I am invested for the Remnant and the Afton family drama.
I agree. I personally think that it's hard to say, but like Michael Afton is one of my favorite video game characters, but technically we don't like really know anything about him.
Yeah, like it's all like context clues and the little bits of personality we get from the few times he does say or write something. But like even just the implications of him as a character are super interesting and very cool.
Yes, I love the implied character arc that he probably goes on. I'm very invested in
Exactly.
in my own headcanon. Yeah. All right, so
I mean, at this point, that's the point of FNAF, is you make your headcanon and have fun with it. Scott's not gonna tell you no most of the time.
theories are just fan fiction backed up by textual evidence.
Exactly.
Yes. Which is why you should never get mad at other people's theories, right, chat? It's all just fun, right,
And
chat?
why calling them fanfiction is not a very good counterpoint.
Yeah.
Because, yes, and so are yours.
So, with all of that, the real topic of today is going to be the books, specifically Tales. We might touch on Frights, but specifically Tales. Right now, in the lead up to Secret of the Mimic, which comes out next week, we are getting a lot of new teasers and trailers for the game. And a lot of people seem to think that these teasers and trailers are contradicting what's been pre-established in the Tales from the Pizzaplex books. And a lot of people are thinking that they actually back up what's in the books. For full disclosure...
It's always funny how people take very diverting interpretations of the exact same thing.
Yeah, everyone's watching the same trailer, same information, same visuals, same context. People will go and tweet, "Tales Games confirmed!" or it's over, I don't believe in Tales games anymore. Um,
Yep.
for my full disclosure, I do currently think that Tales is likely to have supposed to have been canon. I think it's very
That's valid.
likely that when Scott started this project, he's like, the books will tell some of it and the game will tell the rest of the story, and that's what we're doing. But that right now there's a lot of contradictions, and to me it seems like if that's the intention, it was done very poorly.
Agreed. For the most, yeah, like at this point, I think it could have been at one point in development that Scott's like, okay, I'm gonna do this story in the book, and it's gonna match up with the game. But like in the interview, it was mentioned that Daco did with Evan, from Steel Wool. Like I'm pretty sure Evan mentioned that Steel Wool was given a lot of leeway to like make creative decisions, and then like everything just sort of spiraled into like, okay, yeah, maybe it's still matching the general vision Scott had, but it's not a match to the books like it might have started off as.
Yes, but he also said that they worked with the books while they were developing the game. He said that they were coming out at the same time, and he said if you've read the books, you don't know the full story, and he said that it's difficult to work in two mediums at once, and so all of that must imply that the books are canon.
No.
So,
Yeah, that's the things where like people can take the same piece of evidence and interpret it different ways. Because like, yes, the books were being worked on at the same time, but that just means that like this was the general plot that was being worked on. It doesn't mean that Steel Wool was like, okay, what does it say in the books? We're going to match the books, and book people, you gotta include this. All I sort of took that as was like, okay, Scott gave the same basic plot outline to both groups, and they both did their own
yes.
thing.
Yes, I call that, I don't know if anyone else has name for it, but I call that Tales adaptation, which would basically be that they were each given the same outline and they took it in whatever directions they felt suited them.
Yeah, because I think it's sort of a similar case to like how you have Into the Pit, the store, like the original book story, and then you have Into the Pit, the game, which is different from Into the Pit from Fazbear Frights, and then you have Return to the Pit, which is sort of like both of them, but also not. And like, yeah, it's got the same basic plot, and there's a lot of overlap, but there are things that happen in each of them that literally cannot take place in the other. So I sort of have a mental
Yes.
distinction between the versions.
Yes.
But yeah, and like with the whole full story thing, I think you did a good job explaining it in that the video you and the tweet that you made, where it's like full story can mean okay, you only have half the information, but full story can also mean okay, you have half the information, but a little bit of that information is also incorrect. You don't know what actually happened all the way.
Yes, there's like misinformation or confusion or something somewhere in there, and the full story will override it.
Yeah, like honestly, that whole thing, every answer he gave about the connections between the books and the game seemed to be him trying to find a way to avoid answering the question. And I don't think looking at like the specific wording or like, oh, he vaguely alluded to the existence of like them knowing about the books, that means that things have to be the same. I think it's like sort of a nothing burger statement of like, okay, yeah, the books and the games have different information. Yep. Doesn't mean that information is necessarily like not meant to go together. Doesn't mean it is meant to be different. It's just different bits. I feel like if he was meant to be able to confirm Tales games, when Daco asked, "Hey, are the books in the game timeline or whatever?" he would have been able to point blank say yes, but he didn't. He gave a sort of vague statement, trying not to spoil.
Yeah, it was definitely like corporate speak where he was trying to not actually say anything. He also seemed very uncomfortable being on camera and being asked these questions. I think it was very telling that Daco, he didn't even ask, he just asserted multiple times that we would see Fall Fest in this game. He's like, "Oh, I'm so excited to see Fall Fest." And the guy just didn't respond.
Yeah.
And I'm like, does that mean that, of course, we're going to see Fall Fest, so he doesn't need to respond? Or does that mean that he's like, oh no, I don't know if I can tell them that we're not going to see it?
Yeah, and that's the thing is like we don't know the intention behind what was said in the interview, and saying that we know for sure what was meant is a very, very shaky ground to try to stand on.
Yes. So
Not that I don't get why people do it,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's like people could maybe chill a little bit when saying that, "Oh, the debate is over now because a vague statement that's been interpreted different ways by different people is a thing." And I'm like, "Okay, if I can't say that Michael Afton is canonically Fritz Smith, then you can't say this, okay?"
Yeah, I think that my overall stance right now is just that we don't know, like we genuinely don't have enough information one way or the other. And
Yeah.
so I guess my position is anyone who's saying it's confirmed, again, one way or the other, I think are looking at things in a way to confirm the things that they're looking for. With that said, I
Mhm.
am more. I do understand the people who don't think the books are canon more, simply because you can have the perspective that once anything is contradicted, suddenly the books are not a good source of information. Because if the color of the Mushroom Man can be wrong, who knows what else can be wrong?
Yeah, and it does look like there is the Fuchsia Mushroom Man now based
Yes.
on the recent trailer, and like, yeah, there can be like small things we don't know. We don't have the full game. And there can be like other things where it's like, okay, that's a small little detail. They why would they have fact checked that one little thing? And like with the week before, there's
Mm-hmm.
so much like I doubt they were thinking when they used the Disney slogan or whatever. Oh, it wasn't trademarked until a little bit later. Therefore, this puts the timeline back. Different. I doubt the author was looking at that specifically.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, and then that contradicting like whatever Capellia's age has going on. Um, so there I can get, but I can understand like small things, but eventually like if there are so many contradictions, like even little ones, it's like okay, either this is incredibly irresponsible or it's not meant to be identical. And then the more information we get with like the trailer and showing the costume manner and various implications like okay, it looks like he actually had success, and unless we're doing a situation where Edwin was working for Fazbear Entertainment as their employee after they bought his company in his old lace factory, and then he made the mimic. David died. He did the whole thing. Edwin left, abandoned his factory. Fazbear Entertainment comes in to get the mimic, and then in order for Murray's costume manor to exist, based on as far as I can tell, Edwin would have had to come back, get the mimic back from Fazbear if they managed to get a hold of it, and even if they didn't, he would have to have moved the mimic from his factory to Murray's costume manor. He would have had to make the costume manor, get his company back to do so, make all of these inventions, and then have a reason to, and then leave again, have Fazbear Entertainment go back in again, and then Edwin would have to come back again after disappearing to sell his company and then disappear again for 30 years.
and
And I find that very
apparently
unlikely.
and apparently he never noticed that like there's a big tiger uh costume running around his factory, because
Oh
when
yeah,
he sees it in the books he's like, wait a minute, does that mean that like the mimic is alive because it made a tiger rock thing?
yeah, yeah, and that the tiger costume is another interesting thing because like in the book we've got David with his tiger plushie, but then in the game there's the tiger costume question mark. Where did that come
Yeah.
from? Why would Edwin make like if he doesn't seem to be over the death of his son. Why would he make the costume like that? And like if he did, like okay, maybe he did. That's kind of weird. I I don't know.
Yeah, did you
Not like definitive either way, but it's just weird details that I'm like, okay, this is just unlikely.
yeah, it's either not canon or it's stupid. Um
Yeah,
which and there's nothing stopping that from being the case. Like you said, in the week before
yeah.
they messed up the copyright date. The week before also gave Capellia two different ages, and the Silver Eyes got Charlie's birthday wrong. Like there are mistakes, but these would be continuous massive leaps in logic and
Like there's only
silly
so many, and
choices.
so like there's only so many small mistakes combined with big mistakes you can make before it's like, okay, either this is a case where they aren't meant to be the same, or Scott needs to get someone on the lore quality control because like if this is a case where Tales Games is canon, I don't know how I'm going to be able to theorize using the books. If they're just going to change things at random, or even the games, like if they're just going to change things due to a lack of communication, how are we going to be able to theorize
Mm-hmm.
consistently if there isn't a at least mostly consistent thing to look back to.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad that Scott told Dako about how poor the communication was during Security Breach, but I feel almost cheated that we had to wait like 2 years to get that information. Because all these videos
Yeah.
trying to piece together what was going on, you couldn't.
And now people seem to think that like nothing in Security Breach mattered at all, and I don't think that's the case
No.
either.
Because Scott
Because
said
like
what was in the game was in the game, and they're moving forward with that.
yeah, like Ruin was a way of getting things sort of like making things right with the fans. But that doesn't mean that the actual content of Security Breach is now retconned out of existence. He talked about Burntrap's original purpose in the past tense. It was this, but now we have the cutscene. I think
Yep.
what we got in the game is the game that we got, and that's just like with how Scott mentioned that one time that he doesn't retcon things on a whim, and if something was in there that was majorly causing like a retcon that was actually causing issues, he would have addressed it. I feel like that would probably hold up now, and if there was an actual if there was information security breach that was retconned in a way that's causing issues, he would have said like, yeah, ignore this, it doesn't matter, like he did with Doug in the FNAF movie
Hmm.
when the book came out, and it was an older version where Doug was a creep, and he's like, guys, that's not canon, ignore that, sorry. Like if he was able to do that for Doug, I
That's
feel
so
like the more
true.
important thing would be
Yeah, if he's willing to tell us this is not canon, not because it's a creative choice, but because it's a genuine mistake, then I think he would hold up that principle and also tell us that in other cases.
yeah, or I'd hope so anyway.
Yes. Okay, so I guess because you kind of brought it up as far as like not knowing how to use the books, do you think even if okay, let me restart over. Secret of the Mimic comes out, contradicts the books. The books are clearly not in game's continuity. We can't have the storyteller, we can't have the mimic story, like the books just do not line up with what we see in the game. Do you think it would still be fair to use a story like GGY to assume Gregory's backstory if that was not
Yes,
contradicted?
I do, yeah, because it's not like if something isn't in the same continuity that makes it entirely irrelevant. And the GG, like the same way that, like, okay, yeah, stuff from the Tales mimic stories is still relevant, even if things aren't exactly the same. In the case of GGY, I would just my assumption would be, okay, maybe things didn't happen exactly as they did in the book, but Gregory is still GGY, is still Patient 46.
Yes, so it would the way I would
Like how
treat
we
the
can assume
books.
that Henry Emily is William Afton's business
Yeah.
partner, even though, and that his daughter is Charlie, even though technically they haven't been full name dropped in the games.
Yeah, we don't even like we technically don't have Charlie's name. We only have HRY,
We have
although I think
Charlie in the files for the post-it room door,
yes,
and that's it.
and the voice actor said he played Henry. That's the closest we've gotten.
Mhm.
I would
Yep.
treat the books to be like they tell us the lore until contradicted. They're like a B
Yeah.
tier of canon. They are real, but they could be overwritten at any time.
I sort of view the way I sort of go about it is like, okay, each series is a universe where things are away, and things could be this way in the main universe if these events were to happen. So, like, the world mechanics are the same, the general characterization of different characters is approximately similar, but like maybe they just made slightly different choices. So like in the games, Henry is still alive by the time Pizzeria Simulator comes around because he presumably didn't make like the robot Charlies and give fully into his grief to the point where he decided to end things early. So like but he still seems to have that sort of attitude to where he's given up on his own life and he
Yep.
just wants to rest and be with his daughter again.
Yeah, he says I can make myself sleep. Yeah, we all know what that means.
Yeah.
So you
But
have
there but in that version, like but in the books, the daughter he was trying to be with was like a fake and he wanted to be with his actual daughter. And in this it seems like he knows that his daughter is still haunting an animatronic and he's not going to be able to and he's not ready to move on until she's gone, or
yes,
at least he thinks she is.
yeah. So we have the same elements echoing across the continuities where he takes his own life because of what happened. It's just that they're decades apart because of the circumstances of each story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we have not gotten in the games, even though it's been, what, like 6 or 7 years since Fright started, one of the things we haven't gotten in the games is agony. Do you think that it just hasn't been name dropped in game because there hasn't been a place to, or do you think that agony doesn't exist in the games?
I think agony exists. I think that the Dark Remnant in FNAF AR is agony. But it's just not called that because, like, technically speaking, agony is just like an emotion that is like the most powerful emotion
Mm-hmm.
in the FNAF universe, and that's what causes things to stick. But agony is usually associated with like the black goopy stuff, and the black goopy stuff is in the games, um, or at least and like you see the black tears in the movie and
Mm-hmm.
the black tears on the ghost kids in the games, and Pit Trap has the black stuff, and I think that is probably like agony infused remnant. In my mind, remnant is sort of a catch-all term
Yes.
for any supernatural stuff, like any in it like immaterial material that has overlapped with the physical realm, because that's the way it's described in the book. And it seems like agony is one of the ways you can create remnant because William killing the kids was able to do that. And agony is the strongest lingering emotion or whatever. And so that ended up with the kids haunting the animatronics, their spirits being disquieted enough to haunt the animatronics. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, to me, like, agony is just the darker side of remnant,
Yeah.
and you can sort of like mess with what exactly the remnant is made of.
Yeah, I see remnant as being like memory or emotion that's used to power, animatronics or whatever in the real world. It's I think it was She's Always Nervous who came up with the like Monsters Inc. theory, where it's like you harvest the remnant in order to use it as an energy. And agony, just as one of the more powerful emotions, is just the easiest thing to use and the thing that William would use. I think stories like The
Yeah,
Real Jake show that love is also one of those emotions, because I think he comes to
agreed.
life in his doll through love, not through agony. But that's
Though
going to
he
be,
was also in a lot of pain.
yes. But I think that William's going to see, oh, I can harness agony as energy, as opposed to, oh, I can harness love as energy. Like, agony is obviously just going
Oh
to be
yeah.
easier for him. Also, he's the bad guy.
Yeah, and like my personal theory is that the way he found out about Remnant was he killed Charlie in a fit of jealous rage or whatever outside of the restaurant. And then he comes back and, oh, the puppet has tear streaks on its face and it doesn't like me. What's going on here? And then he investigates, finds out Remnant, and he's like, killing kids gets this spooky stuff that is super powerful. I'm gonna do that more, and then he does.
Or, as people have been theorizing, and by people I mean the silly guys in my chat since the teaser this morning, could William be copying what the Mimic did?
I mean,
Because
I guess, but I hope not.
did you
Just for
see
narrative cohesion.
did you see the trailer, the teaser this morning with the mushroom guys?
Yes.
So I think that teaser does a lot of things for this debate specifically. But I also think that it sort of implies that a lot of the things we've chalked up to William or Henry in the series were actually things Edwin did first, with a lot of people comparing the mushroom toy that can repeat words back to you to psychic friend Fredbear.
Well, I do agree that we are finding out, okay, maybe Edwin was the starting point for a lot of these things later. Uh I feel as though taking everything that William and Henry did and ascribing it to the mimic first kind of like takes things out from under them, because
Ruins the story.
like I think it's possible, but I hope not, for the sake of cool plot, because and we know, at least with pretty pretty good certainty that, like, Henry's like, ah, yes, the kids' souls are in machines that I made or whatever, prisons of my making or whatever. I don't remember the exact phrasing he used. So like, Henry's responsible for the creation of the original animatronics. William did sister location. I really hope that William looking into Remnant was his own thing.
Mhm.
Maybe it was inspired a little bit by the Mimic, but I would like it to not be.
Yes,
Because,
I think that'd be a
yeah.
really silly story choice, but I wouldn't put it past him.
Like, because like William's the main villain of the franchise. Like, yeah, the Mimic's the main villain of the current arc, but like, William is the big bad guy, and you don't want to just be like, oh, it was the Mimic the whole time, because that's kind of lame.
I would agree. It would be like, no, my original character was actually the most important the whole time. Like, that's just how it would feel. Even if Scott came up with the Mimic, it would just feel like Stillwool was saying, no, we are more important.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that there could be like some places where maybe William got inspiration from Edwin, or maybe Edwin got inspiration from William and Henry since he was making stuff for them.
Hmm.
Um, and so like, because it seems like Murray's costume manner is pretty closely tied to Fazbear. If we want to use the Steel Wool comparison, I think it'd be like I can kind of see comparisons between like, okay, you've got Fazbear Entertainment and Murray's costume manner, then you have Scott and then Steel Wool working with them, and they're very heavily associated, even though they are different things. Um, and yeah, and there's going to be like ways that they sort of bleed into each other and rub off on each other, but they're still their own separate people with doing their own separate stuff, just working together. I don't know if
Yes.
any of that made sense.
No, 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 I was following. Um,
Okay.
in the in the books, it's a very like the very important timeline in the books is that Edwin was financially struggling and got bought out by Fazbear. That not only
Yes.
is directly told to us, but it's important for the storyteller because the reason that he's on the board in the Pizzaplex era is because they can't fire him because it was part of his contract when they bought out his company.
Yes.
And yet, in this game, he is said to be a contractor for Fazbear, and when you enter into
Mm-hmm.
his warehouse, only certain things seem to be Fazbear property, and the rest seem to be other companies that Edwin works with, like a honey
And
company and
apparently
a
Edwin's got
haircut
employees
thing.
that he's firing and replacing with the the what's his name typing bot dude.
Yeah, he had to fire John FNAF, so he can replace
Yep.
him with a robot.
And if Edwin had employees, like that means he had to have been making enough money to pay the employees, and he definitely didn't have any of that going on in Tales.
And enough funding to make a two-story tall giant music man.
Yeah. And what's also interesting in the books is Edwin despised having to make costumes for the animatronics.
Hmm.
He wanted to make robots and house and useful stuff. He did not find the characters interesting in the slightest. He hated his job. So I find it really interesting that he's got this whole costume manner thing going on in the games.
Yeah,
That's all
especially.
my thoughts on that. Like,
Hmm,
intriguing.
I
Maybe he thought that like the costume manner would be a good way for him to like get extra money so he could do his side projects like the Chat GPT robot and the vacuum fixed version and the coat rack, all that stuff.
Yeah, one of the things I think is interesting as far as just stuff not lining up is the billboard that we saw in the Five Laps at Freddy's update that said Murray Co. with the picture of the vacuum is just not the same vacuum that we would later see in the teasers, which was also
Yes.
from MCM, not from Murray Co.
Hmm.
So do we
Yeah.
think,
Well,
like,
the vacuum I do think was a Murray-Co thing because some of the teasers do establish Murray-Co as being a thing, right?
yes, yeah, they say both. But it's almost
Yeah.
like we now have three vacuums. We have the one in the Tales books, the one on this billboard, and then the one in the teaser.
Yeah, so I've got a couple ideas about that, and I talk about all of this in the video I posted like last week. So if people want to go watch that, they should. Anyway,
Go sub to ID's Fantasy. Also type 14 in the
yes,
chat.
please. Yes, but the way I think the vacuum situation could work is either Flaff just did their own thing and put the thing on the billboard, and there was miscommunication, and that leads back to the other thing of like, please talk to the people who are doing the same stuff. Or it could be that maybe the Hugs vacuum was the first version that didn't end up working well in the long term, and because of whatever circumstances were slightly different in the game version that led to this different outcome, um, Edwin was able to make good on his, like, one thing that's pointed out in the book is there are a couple times where Edwin talks about how his narration talks about how the reason that he wasn't able to rescue his company was because Fiona died in childbirth and he had to raise his son.
Hmm.
And it's mentioned that maybe if he wasn't in such grief, he could have found a way to either fix the vacuum to make something that would work better, or he could create other inventions to pick up the slack that the vacuum was having issues with. And then in the game, we have, okay, if the one vacuum was the first version and then like the Cleanovac was the second better version, and then also he has all these other inventions, maybe this is a version of events where like maybe Fiona didn't die. Uh I don't know for sure, but like maybe something happened and Edwin was able to actually get himself back on his feet after the original vacuum started doing bad, and then he was able to like actually get things together and make it work.
So as far as like those contradictions and Fiona dying, etc., the teasers seem to be showing Edwin and Fiona. We at least got confirmation that it's the same voice actor as Edwin. Like the guy in the teasers
Yeah.
is the same voice actor. And a lot of people
And
were
isn't
already
the
theorizing
yeah.
that it was Edwin, Fiona, and
And is
David.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like to me as well. And like I've seen some people suggest that it's like Edwin's idealized fantasy of them. And like yeah, maybe, but also I think it's quite interesting that it's showing this intact alive family at least for a little bit, and Edwin's company is actually successful.
Yes. So, and it's sort of the looking at evidence the way you want to see it, that the people who thinks the books are canon will look at this and say, "Oh, there's some contradictions, like Edwin's working and needs coffee, but isn't he the boss? Why would he be like that? So how can it be Edwin? Maybe it's just a family that's a stand-in for Edwin. Maybe it's
It's a
parallels. Maybe it's what he wants.
metaphor.
It's a metaphor." But I
No,
think
and the thing is, I do think it is like somewhat figurative. I don't think it's like entirely literal, but like also, yeah, Edwin's going to be. But I don't really get the idea of like Edwin wouldn't need coffee because he's the boss. Because like he's the kind of person who, even as the boss, would be working himself into the ground, trying to get stuff done. Like he wants to like, and he'll create things to lighten the load off himself. Like what he does in the books is like, okay, he's got all these projects he has to get done for Fazbear, so he makes the mimic as an entirely separate thing in order to entertain his child, so his child isn't distracting
mhm.
him. So yeah, he'd make a fancy coffee pot in order to make his life easier and use it. Why wouldn't he?
But is the presence of Fiona in those trailers while Dave is like, alive basically while he's crawling around, do you think that that is a solid indication that this game's timeline is separate from the books?
I think it can be used as evidence, but it is like an advertisement. Only so literal it can get. If Fiona shows up in the game, it's like, okay, there she is. But
Especially if she likely
yeah.
has a voice actor.
Yeah, that's something else I find interesting. Is like the ways I could see that playing out is maybe if Fiona did die, it could be stuff of like her and Edwin, like it could be like recordings of her and Edwin talking, before David was born, and then after that it's only, Edwin and David. But if there's any voice recordings of that have Fiona and David in the same one that isn't like the day of David's birth, that's gonna be
He's just
that's
saying
that's
like,
gonna be a contradiction there, dog.
yeah, he's just saying like goo goo gaga, and then she's like, I am dying. Um,
Yeah, unless it's that, then I'm going to have a raised eyebrow.
would you say to people who think that the books are canon that there's any particular thing that convinced you? Because I reached out to you before I put my video up because I wanted to quote a tweet you had where you said that you were like 96% Tales games. do you have a specific moment that flipped you to not being majority Tales games?
The moment I saw the trailer. I saw Murray's costume manner, and I was already a little suspicious, like just the outer facade. I'm like, okay, maybe this is some situation where Fazbear just made this thing, but like, there was a reason I wasn't 100% on board with Tales games, and it was largely the Murray's costume manner in the FNAF, in the Help Wanted 2 content update. I'm like, okay, that's weird, guys. This is a little off. I could still see Tales games happening, but this is weird. And then we saw the trailer, and I'm like, Edwin Murray is a contractor. This is the building we're getting the mimic from after Edwin left. What? And then every trailer and teaser and whatever that comes out has just made me be like, okay, now I'd say the likelihood of Tales games in my mind is closer to like 30%. And
Because
and the 30% is a situation specifically where it's like, okay, Scott's going to come out and say, yes, the Tales of books are in the game continuity, and then I'll just be looking at it like, then please do better quality control, sir.
yeah, I think that if that ends up being the case, I would be genuinely disappointed because it means that no one's looking at anything. And obviously, Scott's very busy with the movie. I think he's more involved with the movie than he is at the games at the moment. But it
Yeah.
would be very upsetting if this was all meant to go one
Like,
way.
he didn't even look over the basic stuff to make sure it matched?
Yeah, like when Fiona dies, like if those are
Yeah.
contradicted, it would be like, well, Scott doesn't care. If we care more than Scott, I would be upset because what are we doing
Yes.
here?
Yeah. It's just like, yeah, there's a gap of time in the book where we don't know what happens, but like it would be really weird to shove Secret of the Mimic into that based on what we know about it now. Like, when it was just announced, I could see it. When we got the content update, I'm like, okay, we're getting book stuff in the game. This is evidence that the books and the games are overlapping, but like, things are a little weird. And then we got the trailer. I'm like, okay, there's overlap, but this is giving me more like, yes, the Silver Eyes is a very similar in some ways to the, or a better example, the FNAF 1 movie is very similar in some ways to the FNAF 1 game, except it's also very different. And if someone tried to tell me they were the same continuity, I would look at them like they were crazy.
Yes, and I've also seen people try to use the movie to say that, oh, during the time of FNAF 1, the restaurant is closed. Something with the week before has now contradicted. But I was never convinced of the argument that we can use things from the movie that way.
Yeah, like you could say, oh, maybe this is supposed to like give us insight into Vanessa's character, or Mike's character, or William's character, because like, okay, we've got all these characters and they're doing stuff, and like, Ghost Kid mechanics and how dreams work in FNAF. Great. Helpful. I like that. But like, to say that the stuff in the movie is the same way it played out, like, because this is going to be a universe where FNAF 2 happens after FNAF 1, you gotta be very careful saying like, ah yes, this means this. Unless FNAF 2 is set before FNAF 1, in which case I have questions.
About Abby's age. Maybe it's the ball pit. Maybe that's how this
Maybe it's
all
the ball
works.
pit!
Maybe maybe Fiona's alive in the games because she was taken from an
Because of the
earlier
ball
time.
pit!
The ball pit. It just solves everything. She's just a memory
Oh,
of
man.
Fiona.
Yes,
Put
yes.
put into a robot. She's a robot adult. You know, she's Eleanor. It all makes sense. You can make it make sense. My fan fiction
100%.
is totally fine.
Shout out to April Fool's Theory last year, and the one this year becoming a real video.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, there's always a way you can like try to finagle the pieces to make things work, but like if there's counter evidence, it I find it very frustrating when people's counter to your counter evidence is, "Oh, you're just coping." I'm like, "I could say the exact same thing about you. I could say that someone who believes Tails game at this point is coping with the contradictions by saying they just actually don't matter." And like I could say that, and I guess I'm kind of saying it now, but like I don't want to because it just cuts the entire discussion short and writes people's ideas off as like, "Oh, you're just coping. You're in denial. This what you think doesn't matter because I'm right and you're wrong." And that doesn't seem very conducive to having a healthy fandom or discussion.
A calm
So I
discussion?
try to avoid it.
Yeah. I'm very put off by anyone who says that the people who disagree with them just haven't read the books or aren't as good at making theory. Like, they're either calling them stupid, they're calling them uninformed, they're saying they don't love the franchise as much as they do. And I'm just like, no, if all of these theories have legitimate evidence pointing towards them, then there's a billion factors that could go into why you believe one over the other. I think there's a lot of really good evidence for Charlie dying last. But I also think there's a lot of good evidence for Charlie dying first. And so whichever one I believe is
Yeah.
just based on how I weigh the evidence in my mind. It doesn't mean that the people who disagree on this topic are stupid or who don't know the evidence.
Yeah, and what's also interesting is people will try to boil down the entirety of the other side to like a couple key points that if these are ever shown to not be the case, then that proves my theory right. And so like when the mimic appeared for the first time in Ruin, people were like, okay, this confirms TalesGames and confirms that the mimic is Burntrap. And meanwhile, I was sitting there staring at the mimic like, okay, this shows that the mimic is in the games, and to me, confirms that the mimic is not Burntrap. Because they look entirely different.
Yes. Well, they have the same fingers, don't you know?
Do they though? The proportions are a little different, actually. And people will be like, oh, but the rust marks match up. And I'm like, well, actually, they largely do not. There is one spot where they do, and that is it. Well, there's a couple spots, but like one notable spot. But and it's just stuff like that where it's like, we'll look at things, and like, I think, like, even if I think something confirms something, I generally try to avoid saying that, because I don't want to be dismissive of the other side of the argument. So, like, I think that I am personally of the opinion that it is confirmed that William Afton died before Phone Guy. But I understand why people think otherwise, so I avoid saying that it's confirmed that William died before FNAF 1.
Yes, I think
Stuff like that.
it's definitely controversial, but I think me and you are both follow me before FNAF 1.
Yes.
Yes. A lot of people do not agree with that and do not like that. And then I had someone, this was recently, but they were trying to use the evidence in the Dead by Daylight game to show that Follow Me was after FNAF 1.
Oh my...
And part of
I've
me...
seen that. I got a comment like that. I'm like, where in Dead by Daylight, A, does it show that? And B, would that have any impact on the games if it's just a little fun crossover thing? I don't think that's canon, really. Like, what you could maybe take as canon is the description of, like, how William thinks, and okay, he wakes up. So, okay, like, maybe you could take, he was unconscious for a while in that room, and he enjoys killing people. You could take his voice lines as things he would actually say. But other than that, I'm like, that's just a little fun collaboration. That's not, I don't think that's meant to be lore. And also, I still have no idea what people are saying from that would confirm Follow Me 93 or whatever.
So
because I'm just sitting there like, what?
Yeah, so the first of all, I completely agree. Even if this game said something like crazy, I would still say, but it's just a crossover with Dead by Daylight. Like, I'm going to take the text of the actual games before I take the Dead by Daylight crossover. But some people disagree. They're like, Scott worked with them one-on-one, and Dead by Daylight always takes into account the canon of the series it's pulling from. So everything in this game is equally as canon as a real FNAF game. And I just disagree, and there's sort of no middle ground there.
Like, as a matter of principle, the fact that Springtrap is taken from FNAF universe into the Dead by Daylight one to do this is a non-canon thing, so...
Yes. Although I saw people saying that he, like, that Springtrap actually does Dead by Daylight and then returns to his spot before FNAF 3, and I'm just like, you can think that.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull up the text, but the thing that apparently contradicts Follow Me before FNAF 1 is that it says that the Freddy Fazbear's was, like, long abandoned when he gets Springtrapped.
Wait, where does it say that?
So I'm going to pull up the text so that I can read it verbatim, but it's something to the effect of the boardroom, the secret room was boarded up. William breaks it open to do Follow Me.
What?
And
well,
then
I know that theory, but, like, does it say that in the Dead by Daylight stuff?
It says that he wakes up as Springtrap, hearing, like, the portal opening to Dead by Daylight, and then just walks into the kitchen, which implies that the the safe room is not boarded up.
But it's boarded up by FNAF 3.
But do
And there
we
was a
know
portal,
that?
wasn't there?
Do we know? Oh, the portal was in the kitchen.
Maybe this is just a universe where the room never got boarded up, because we do
Yeah.
know by FNAF 3, because of Phone 2, that the room was boarded up with him inside. So...
Yes, and that's what I think. I think that he gets spring locked inside and then it gets boarded up. I don't think that he unboards it to do follow me.
Yeah, that's a very similar situation in my mind to the Edwin thing I was talking earlier. Like, okay, if TalesGames is the case, then Edwin leaves, comes back, buys his company back, makes a whole bunch of stuff, leaves again, Fazbear comes again, and like just it's unnecessary repetition in my mind. Like it's less repetition, so I could see it more, but yeah, like
Yep.
I personally do not think it makes as much sense to board up the room after specifically the missing children incident, because at that point there's nothing in there to hide that people don't already know about and won't, and like everything that is, because the only things that they would want to hide are the Springlock suits, but like Springlock suits get taken to the FNAF 2 location, and then
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like people didn't know those existed. The only thing that the public wasn't aware of were the safe rooms in the first place. And like they already knew that the kids were taken into a back room and then vanished. It's not like there's not anything new to hide. No one knew where the bodies were. So I just don't see the point. And why stop the employees from going in to get their belongings unless there was something immediately present that they did not want anyone to see, such as a dead body?
Yes, and I think that one of the reasons that they say that they boarded up is like to hide the springlock suits, and as you just said, Golden Freddy is in the FNAF 2 location.
Yeah. And like it's like, oh yeah, someone's been messing with the yellow suit or whatever, and like it just feels kind of weird.
Yep. So I think that there will always be people who will take different sources with different grains of salt, and it seems like me and you are on the same page as far as Dead by Daylight and probably also the books. But the fact that there are other people out there who take the books and take Dead by Daylight as equal to canon in the games means that it's not about the quality of the argument. It just means that we are not agreeing on the status of these exterior sources. And so
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, I can, if I can type my argument just right, I'll convince them, because we're almost starting from such different places that conversation can't really happen.
hmm Yeah, and I'm looking at the Dead by Daylight stuff that you sent, and I think my initial interpretation of this was uh that like because it talks about how long it's been, and like hearing children's laughter. My initial interpretation of it, which is probably incorrect, I don't know, was that he was at the FNAF 3 location and
Hmm.
then got to found the portal.
Yeah, because you literally play
Because
Balloon Boy's
he's
laugh
in
to
a
lure
room that
him.
hasn't been closed up, and he has to be closed up at some point, and he's in a place where like it looks like it's decomposing or whatever. And like, yeah, the FNAF 1 location was, but also the FNAF 3 location looks like it. It could be this was like an alternate version of the FNAF 1 location where like maybe the entity removed the door so that he could get to, well, not the door, remove the wall so that Springtrap could get to the kitchen. Like it could be as simple as that. Put the portal there in the first place. So,
Yeah.
eh.
Once we're analyzing grammar, I sort of get into the like
Yeah.
we're thinking about this more than they thought about it when they wrote it. So I don't think there's really any lore
Yeah.
to get from here.
Probably.
So
Anyway.
a question that chat wanted me to ask was, what was your first experience with the books? You said that you really got into the franchise with Security Breach. When did you pick up your first FNAF novel?
Ooh, I don't remember the exact time, but it was pretty quick. I think the general order of events was I watched like 5 different people do playthroughs of Security Breach. Um, and then I binged watched all of like Markiplier's FNAF videos. And then I started checking out all of the books out of order from from my library as ebooks, and I read them all in line at like Disney World and Universal while my family was on vacation.
And was that the Silver Eyes, or was that like Frights and Tales?
All of them. I don't
All
think
of
Tails
them.
was coming out yet. It was legitimately, I would be checking out of order all of the books whenever the second they were available. They were downloaded onto my phone.
That's
So it
intense.
was spread out over the course of time, but it was like relatively quickly. Like I was reading the books before I posted my first video.
Wow. So were you when Frights was coming out, were you thinking that they were canon? Were you unsure? Were you thinking they weren't canon? Did you think Stitchline was? Like, what was your sort of gut feeling going into Fazbear's Fright?
I think all of Frights was out by the time I got there, or at least most of it was. Maybe not the last book. I don't remember when things happened. But I went in not thinking it was canon. Well, I thought it was canon, but not the same continuity. I
Yes,
try to be
yes.
very, very specific with my terminology usage in that regard. Um, because I was taking the general stance of like, okay, there are stories in here that are not compatible with the games. Because you've got What We Found, especially. Um, Springtrap shows up with Hudson. Hudson gets in the oven after one day. That's not what we get in FNAF 3. And I was like, okay, this is in the same series as all these other events. I think all of the Fazbear Fright stories are in the same universe, and even if there is similar stuff that might go over to the games, like I am currently of the mindset that Mrs. Afton could be Eleanor in the games if Eleanor
Mhm.
were to ever make an appearance. Um, but like, and then there's other stuff like Security Breach was out, and in Fazbear Frights, William Afton's body exploded. So we got Burn Trap, and
Mhm.
I still think that, like, okay, you've got very toasted, slightly repaired spring Bonnie suit with a corpse attached. My brain's like, that is almost certainly William Afton. And
That
so
yes.
Fazbear Frights has William's body explode, and I did know that bit going in, I think. And so I'm like, okay, this is an alternate universe where this stuff happened.
Yes, Burn Trap to me just seems like they picked Scrap Trap out like in Security Breach, you're underneath the Pizzaplex, which is the FNAF 6 location, and there is a
Yes.
burned body in a body in a Bonnie suit, which is what would have happened to Scrap Trap. So it just seems very clear that that's Scrap
Emerging
Trap.
with purple eyes in a cloud of purple smoke.
Yes.
Which may not have been the initial intention, but Burn Trap as a character was meant to exist in one way or another.
Yeah, which means that if Frights was canon, it means that they pulled him out of there. The suit was gone, but his body remained. He was dying, but he grew an arm back, and then he exploded, and then he went underneath a
And then
lake,
somehow
and then he was somehow
and then
back.
yeah, and like even it also doesn't make sense for me to for that to be a different body, just because like how would it have gotten so entangled in there if it wasn't someone who got spring locked and then set on fire like Scrap Trap was?
Yes.
It's like that's just my thoughts. I understand people think differently, but I like so going into Fazbear Frights, I'm like, there are things about this that I do not believe work at all with the game continuity. Therefore, it is a different thing. But I liked the books. I may not believe they're in the game continuity, but I am 100% on board with reading them. I will say I enjoyed the books significantly more before people started telling me that my interpretation of them was stupid and wrong. Um,
Yes. I
It
I
has been harder to enjoy them in recent years, but I still like them, and I think the stories are neat. And I just I would prefer a little more clarity going forward on how to use them. But even so, like I got a comment on I think my last video being like, "Why do you hate the books?" And I'm like, "I do not. I bring them up in every video because I like them, and people should read them."
yeah, I'm not going to say who the conversation was with because I don't want to draw hate their way. But I had a conversation with another FNAF theorist YouTuber, and we're both of the opinion that the books are not canon, but we both enjoy them. And so we almost wanted to like write a letter to Scott to be like, "Hey, if you came out and said the books aren't canon, then no one's going to be mad at you because the people who enjoy them will now get to enjoy them without people yelling at them that like Andrew's not real." And the people who enjoy them will be able to talk about them almost like within their own continuity. Like we can have FNAF theorists who only talk about book lore, and we won't have to have people say, "Oh, well, Phasgu isn't important because it's not in the games." It's like, well, no, because Phasgu is important to the books. So now we can have Fazgoo theories, and we can have all this. We can double the amount of continuity and content that we can talk about if
Honestly,
Scott just
I'd get
told
behind
us.
that letter. I just like clarify the way that the books are meant to be used with the games. That would be great. Like, yeah, some people might be disappointed with some stuff, but people are going to be disappointed no matter what you do, and this way will at least like chill things out. So some that's one thing I'm kind of hoping for with Secret of the Mimic is like if Tails Games is the case, I'll manage and I'll be disappointed. If it's not the case, then I'll be actually able to like cope with things. So, like,
Cope?
because it'll be like, okay, yeah, how dare like everyone's coping over something. It's
Yeah.
coping isn't a bad thing. It just means you are managing things that you did not expect. Like if um if it turns out that Tails Games isn't the case, I'll be able to be like, okay, there are these contradictions. I can work with them because they are not meant to be the same thing. Um, I don't know.
When you said
It
you,
would be nice to get some clarification, but I get why he doesn't answer questions because that keeps people talking about it. But at this point, there's
boo.
so much that hasn't been answered that people will continue talking about things, and it might actually open discussion more if we aren't stuck at this spot.
Yes, I think if we weren't arguing the same thing over and over with no resolution in sight, then the brain power could be used on something new, and also people would enjoy it.
Yeah, like
When you
I just made a video like a couple weeks ago talking about Mrs. Afton being Eleanor in
Mhm.
Security Breach or whatever. Not insecurity, but like in relation to MatPat's original theory about Mrs. Afton being the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. And like that was the most fun I have had with a video in forever because I've spent so much time talking about the Mimic that it is driving me crazy.
it's good to just talk about other things for once.
Yes.
Yeah, and the people who read the books probably enjoy Eleanor as a character, and so having
Yeah.
having a theory that's like, here's how Eleanor could be in the games, which should be exciting for those people. If Eleanor was in the games, that would be really exciting. But I feel like there would always be the layer of disappointment that, like, oh, I guess I was wrong about the books being canon the whole time. Whereas Scott just told us the truth right now, you wouldn't have that layer of disappointment.
Yeah. And even if there was that layer of disappointment, there's always going to be a layer of disappointment every time anything happens where it's like evidence is pointing one way or another for someone. So it's just like you can't make everyone happy 100% of the time, and sometimes you gotta give some answers before people get so disillusioned that they leave.
Yes, and also just very, very upset, especially at YouTubers. Like, the only times people have ever physically threatened me have been over my book opinions, and I think that would go away
Ooh.
if Scott just told us the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right.
When you said you'd be disappointed if Tales was canon, was that because you don't like the stories, or because you would just be upset that they didn't care
I
about the
love the
continuity?
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be exclusively because they didn't care enough about the continuity in order to even try to make it similar. Because like when Tales first started, I was 100% on board with Tales games. I took that line on the back of the book saying set in the world of the newest games as confirmation that the Tales books were in the game continuity. And then I started noticing contradictions. And I'm like, wait a second. Maybe that's not what's going on here. There are these things that are like what initially got me suspicious of Tales games was the way that the time frames would work out. Because in the Tales from the Pizzaplex series, Edwin has his company in the 70s, or like he starts his vacuum company
Mhm.
in the early 70s. And then um and then afterwards there's like a 5-year gap between that and him leaving. And then there's a 40-year gap between like David being born and well, so and then like whenever Edwin was 24 and then when he was 64, which would put which would put the Pizzaplex being built before the most likely date for FNAF 3 and Pizzeria Simulator. And I was like, that is strange. And like, yes, that could be a detail where they messed up, but also, as long as you interpret things the way they're probably meant to be interpreted, the phrasing's a little weird in spots, but like, there is a valid interpretation of like, okay, they meant to say this here because they said this over here. um, and like things were internally consistent in a way that like Charlie's birthday and death day weren't, and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that's a little weird. I'm not sure I believe that Tails can be 100% matched for the games anymore. And people did not like that. And then stuff kept happening. I'm like, there are issues here, and people were being very insistent, and now we're here, and I'm like, and here are more contradictions. Woohoo!
And then the trailers came out.
And then the trailers, and then the teasers, and I'm just like side-eyeing everything that's released, and I'm like, and then I look over at the people who are trying to tell me that like, the debate is settled because guy made vague statement in interview, and I'm like, okay.
We'll see in a week.
And even then, who knows how people will choose to interpret things.
Yep. I know people who okay, so in my opinion, if the game goes out of its way to somehow not contradict Tails, then to me that would imply that they were sort of given a mandate to try to fit it in with the books. Obviously, we see it contradicts it in certain ways already, but if there's a
Yes,
line that does explain that he disappeared twice and rebuilt his business, and at the end he like
exactly.
someone hands him a thing and it's like, you're being sued for $1 billion, so you're going to be poor by the time that the storyteller's story starts. I'd be like, okay, they didn't say the books are canon, but they sort of went out of their way to
This
not
is them
contradict
finding a
them.
way to make it work.
Yes. And I think if they don't do that and there's just a bunch of contradictions, then that would just be the case that the books weren't meant to be canon or weren't taken seriously by Steel
Right. Like,
Wool.
yeah, because like there can be overlap, but just because something from the books is brought to the games does not then make those books the same continuity as the games.
Yes, cough cough, William Afton's name in the Silver Eyes.
Yep, William, Henry, all sorts of stuff. Remnant, I don't
Yep.
know when Remnant was first mentioned.
Yeah, no, Remnant does come from the books.
Overlapping
I
yeah,
remember
overlapping
when
elements does not mean everything is 100% one to one.
exactly. I remember when Remnant came out and MatPat was like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know like how seriously we can take this. And then Sister Location kind of made the books more seriously important to the game's lore. That was a big moment in the fandom.
Yep.
What's your
And I like that the books are important because I like the books.
yes?
I just think it would make more sense and also be better for the franchise if the books weren't required reading
I
for
agree.
understanding the games.
I think that Steel Wool's biggest, the best thing that they could do, the best thing that modern FNAF could do, would be that years when we don't have a help wanted or a security breach or a secret of the mimic, whatever, just release like a classic FNAF game that can deliver little bits of lore. Like Scott made those games in like 3 months. I think Steel Wool could do it so that on off years where we don't have a big game release, we could have one of those.
There's like little small games.
Yeah, little small game that can
They might be a little janky, but they also aren't as big, so the jank is a little less of an issue.
yeah, and they could push the lore forward or give us a little backstory on characters because like as of right now, we don't have a lot of characterization of Gregory or Vanessa or Cassie, and we sort of have to
I'm really hoping the
rely.
next game is like I would pay good money for a prequel to Security Breach of like that shows us what was going on with Gregory and Vanessa.
Yeah, and like literally like the only thing we have about these characters are the tapes that are likely faked because of like mind viruses or whatever. And then like Escape the Pizzaplex. I would rather have a game, give me a classic FNAF style game where
Yeah,
it's
I
it's
want
all
to
about
see
Gregory,
I want to
right?
see how Gregory ended up in the position where he became Patient 46. I want to know if like the whole two Vanessas thing is meant to actually be two Vanessas, please Steel Wool. Um just stuff where it's like there are things where I would like for things to be elaborated on. Just like cuz there's that gap between Help Wanted and Security Breach where a lot happens that's alluded to, and I hope we get more information, or maybe afterwards we can get like a game set after Ruin where like maybe if we play as Gregory again and he has to like explain stuff to Freddy or Vanessa depending on who's around. And Gregory and Vanessa cope with their having formerly worked for Glitch Trap or whatever. Or maybe Gregory, like, because it seems like he has memory issues in Security Breach because he doesn't know who Vanessa is and is unfamiliar with a whole bunch of stuff. Like, maybe he's, like, finding out what happened to him and that's how we find out what happened with him as Patient 46, stuff like that.
Yes, and we shouldn't have to wait what's probably going to be, 6 or 7 years after Security Breach for, like, the next game that has Vanessa and Gregory in it to learn their backstory. Like, we should be invested in who they are already.
Yeah, like, the big games are cool, but if they just did, like, some smaller, cheaper games to keep interest going, I think that would be awesome.
Yes, this is my plea to Steel Wool. If any of the 194 people watching right now are Steel Wool, just make more games, smaller games. You can do it. I'll give you money.
Yes. Like, I would be willing to have like the big games be less if we got like some smaller ones.
Yeah, because ultimately, like, I'm sure the books make Scott a lot of money, especially compared to like the amount of money it takes to develop a game. But there's always going to be fans of the franchise who will never pick up a book, but will play or at least like watch Markiplier play every single game, which means that they'll be
Yep.
they'll be invested in the characters and the story. They'll buy
That's
Sun
one
and
reason I'm
Moon
so excited
plushes.
for Secret of the Mimic.
Yeah.
Is because like we spent the past 2 years or however long only knowing the Mimic from the books, and now we're coming out with this game that is the Mimic's story,
Mm-hmm.
and it's finally a situation where I think once we play the game, you won't have to we won't have to talk like in the book this is what happened anymore because we'll have the game that basically shows all of the important stuff in itself. And it would have been really nice if this had been like closer in release date to Ruin because it's such an important like if Ruin came out and then the next like and then instead of Help Wanted 2 we got Secret of the Mimic, I think that would have worked timing wise a lot better. I can understand why they wouldn't do that, especially if they like development times and focus and stuff that they had to do. But I feel like it would have worked a lot better narratively if we got introduced to the Mimic at the end of Ruin, and then the very next game at the end of that year was the Mimic's backstory.
And another odd thing with the release schedule is just that the Mimic's story was told in Tales so many years ago that it's almost like, well, why do I care what his secret is when I already know who made him and why he was built and what happened? Like, I know what happened to him decades ago and I know what happened to him in the present day. Like, if the books are one-to-one with the games, what is the secret of the Mimic that we don't already know?
Yeah. And if it had come out earlier, we would like. This is not saying, oh, the Steel Wool people should have worked faster on
No,
Secret
no.
of the Mimic because I realize that's not how that works. But I feel like I would have been willing to sacrifice Help Wanted 2 to get Secret of the Mimic earlier.
Yes, or I could have asked for, like, a series between Frights and Tales, not about the Pizzaplex. Because as it is right now, we've had Tales come and go. We've had these Choose Your Own Adventure books come and go. And in the games, we're still in the Pizzaplex era.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like all of the ancillary marketing is like, okay, we're done with the Pizzaplex, but the games are like, actually, we're still in the middle of that story.
Yeah, I mean, well, technically we're going a little outside of it for this because it's like 5, 6 decades before, however long.
Yeah.
4, 5, 6. Uh, but like, it would be nice. Like, I like the books, but I would also like them to like. I don't know how to phrase it. I think people are like you mentioned earlier. There's going to be a lot of people who just aren't going to read the books, and if people feel like they have to read the books to understand their video game franchise, that's an issue. And so I feel like that's an issue that could have been rectified a lot earlier if we had gotten Secret of the Mimic or like more Mimic story in the games.
Mm-hmm.
previous to, and if Tails was supposed to be in the game continuity, I think it would have been neat if Scott had, like, I get he's busy, but maybe we get a Scott game of
Yes.
the Mimic epilogues. Because that would have been a relatively short thing where we could have gotten all of that pretty quickly.
Or even like a what was the side scroller fighting game that came out before Security Breach? Like
Fury's Rage.
even something like that just introduces the concept of the Mimic to games only players.
Yeah.
Like just
And like we're getting that now, which I appreciate.
yeah.
But it would have been nice to get something about it earlier. Other than just ruin. Because that was great and all, but it has led to 2 years of exhaustion on my end as people tell me that Mimic Trap is confirmed and TalesGames is confirmed, and I'm not allowed to think that Glamrock Freddy's possessed.
I definitely think the Glamrock Freddy's possessed. I don't know where that comes from.
Thank you.
I my theory at the moment is that the remnant from the after the post FNAF 6 fire that's under the building is sort of fighting with the storyteller AI that's in all the technology. So you have the Glamrocks who are sort of possessed by the spirits that are below them, but their operating system is being run by the Mimic. So when Glamrock Freddy like powers down in the beginning of Security Breach and he reboots in safe mode.
Safe mode, he's not connected to the system.
Yes, so he's only connected to the spirits.
Yeah, that's valid.
That's my current thought.
Interpretation is relatively similar, except I think before Help Wanted 2, it was William in control of the Mimic storyteller situation. Because of just like, okay, so Glitch Trap, apparently, like there's these text lines in the code, and like at this point I do think Steel will intentionally leave some stuff in the code for us to look at, based on stuff I've heard.
Ooh.
And there's these text lines of like, oh yeah, so you don't help it. You gotta get its memories, and a small piece of his code remains. It distinguishes between it and his. And I'm like, okay, so if Glitch Trap is the it in this situation, a small piece of his code remains is this William, and the memories being the puppet, like the little puppets of like the MCI and Charlie. I'm like, okay. The Mimic would have no recollection of, at the very least, Charlie. Charlie being the puppet. At least in my understanding. So to me it makes a lot of sense of like, okay, the Mimic program in the books was used for story generation. Meanwhile, the circuit boards in Help Wanted were for pathfinding. And the Mimic program's usage was just a general thing. Meanwhile, the circuit boards are these old things that get stolen back from the companies that they're given to. And like whenever they're given to a company, there's something involved where it's like, okay, this is a William thing that the Mimic could not know about. Like William saying lines that are only said in Ultimate Custom Night. William was there for that. The Mimic was not. Things like that where I'm like, okay, maybe Glitch Trap is like William taking control of the Mimic program to do his own thing. Then Help Wanted 2 happens. And that's why only after Help Wanted 2 do we get the Mimic as itself.
Yes. Because Giant Vanny destroys Glitch Trap, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. I also think, because in Princess Quest, it says, like, I always come back, let me out.
Yeah.
How would the Mimic know that?
I always come back to things specific is like, okay, where would, like, even if the Mimic did somehow see William and copy him doing murder and became a William imitator despite there being not really any evidence of that in the book itself, if it did all that, where would it have heard the I always come back?
Yes.
Why would it be copying that? Why would it stick so closely to the William Afton persona when its whole thing is changing characters?
Ooh, that is a good point. If it's supposed to hop between, it's supposed to be one program for all the characters.
The only thing it actually sticks to with any degree of regularity is the White Tiger. Why would it choose to be exclusively a rabbit for so long?
Yes, and it does appear as like a rabbit type entity again in Princess Quest.
Yes.
Do you think
I just think it's interesting.
I also find that interesting. Help Wanted 2 obviously ends around the time that Ruin starts because you become the bot and then you give Cassie the mask.
Yes.
Do you think that all of Help Wanted 2 happens after Security Breach, or could it happen any time before then and then he's just a robot for a while?
I think it's probably after Security Breach, considering, like, okay, Gregory gets down into the Pizzeria Simulator location. And like I think Princess Quest 3 has to be beaten by this point in
Mm,
time. And I don't think Gregory's the one who beat Princess Quest 3. I think it was actually the Help Wanted 2 protagonist, because you have to beat them in sequential order as one person, based on the messages left in Security Breach. Um but regardless of who did it, I think that it's post Security Breach, and Princess Quest 3 has been beaten, which makes Princess Quest 4 available, which we then can get rid of Glitch Trap. And Glitch Trap seems to exist up until that point in time. And Glitch Trap seems very, like, seems to be there in Security Breach, so
mhm.
especially with, like, Vanny and stuff.
Yes, which makes him present in Security Breach, but then not by Ruin, which is when we first actually see the Mimic in person.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Like that's not even like a that's not even a crackpot theory. That's just putting the events of the games in order and seeing what the story is.
Yeah.
Hmm. No, that's really good. Um,
Thanks.
do you think that again going sort of back to the if the books aren't canon, how much can we take from them? Do you think there's anything to be gained by looking into specifically the story about I think his name was like Steve Snodgrass who made the indie
Steve!
games before Help Wanted that they were based on like is that story probably canon even if Tales isn't? Because that story gives us a lot of important context.
I mean, I think the general basics of it are at the very least the same. Like, okay, we've got. I mean, we know that the basics are the same, and that's where,
Yes.
like, the connection is, like. But one thing that I think is interesting is, like, in the games, we have, okay, the law, the indie dev is in litigation with Fazbear Entertainment. It's
Mm-hmm.
like there is lawsuits or whatever going
Lawsuit
on.
pending. Yep.
And in the book, he's dead.
Yes.
How you are suing a corpse? Question mark.
Hmm. A lot of people, I haven't particularly read that story, but a lot of people also seem to think it confirms like illusion discs, which have not been in any continuity besides the Silver Eyes.
I think it shows that there's still a concept that Scott's thinking about at the very least,
Yes.
and also robot people.
And robot people, or at least robots that
Like, yes,
can
they're
be
weird robot
people.
people, and they aren't very advanced ones. But hey, if Scott's making robots that look and act like people, they're not doing it well, but like stick a spirit in there, and
Yep.
maybe you know.
Okay, yeah. So I didn't even think of the fact that he's alive during Help Wanted but dead in the story because he dies while like right after making the third game and before he can finish the fourth game. So he has to die
Yeah,
before
because
the
he
events of
finds
Help
out about the
Wanted.
illusion discs and that his supposed family is actually a bunch of robots. That he's been thinking were people because of the illusion disc tech, hallucinatory
Mm-hmm.
audio systems. And then he dies by the end of that story. I'm like, okay, that was another thing that factored into my being skeptical of Tales games, because I'm like, bro's dead. Unless Fazbear Entertainment is suing a corpse, which I guess I wouldn't put past them. How?
Yeah, that's so like that is a Tales games contradiction that I had just never heard before. Which seems like you could have figured that out the moment that that book came out. Like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
did think
huh.
about it like pretty early on, but I didn't really start noticing until I noticed like the issues
Mhm.
elsewhere. I'm like, wait a second, hold on.
Man is dead and alive at the same time. Interesting. Okay,
I mean,
so
that's something that can happen in FNAF,
well,
unless Steve Snodgrass got Michael Afton.
they shoved remnant in him. Keep making games for us, Game Boy. We need to sue you. Um,
keep making games, keep making games so we can sue you.
that we're making you make. Huh. Very like you're opening my mind to like different. I don't know. I feel like the weight that I put on different evidence is like shifts whenever I talk to someone. When I talked to Withered last week, I was like, you know, that does make Tales games more reasonable. And now I'm talking to you. I'm like, oh, maybe it makes Tales games less reasonable.
That's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah. I'm like, if I talk to every single person on Earth, maybe I'll come to a Correct conclusion. Oh my gosh.
I mean, if you talk to every person on Earth, you'll eventually get to Scott, and he can just tell you if he wants.
If you call every number in the phone book, you will eventually reach Scott Cawthon.
Please don't do that.
Do not do that.
You can. He has an email. If you want to email him, just send him an email. He probably won't respond.
He will almost certainly not respond to you. Okay.
But
Do
yeah.
you, okay, I have sort of two more topics for bookie questions.
Okay.
A lot of people think that the story Frailty, the first Tales story, confirms that Frights and Tales are in continuity with one another. Do you believe
This
that?
is one of the situations where I'm like, confirms is a strong word. Evidence is like it's evidence for it. And if it is a case where Tales is in the same continuity as Fazbear Frights, then I am even extra on board with they are separate from the games. But I do think that could explain some things. If William Afton's corpse did explode and he's in a lake and he's just gone, that could explain why the mimic is there as itself during Tales. Why there doesn't like because in the Tales stories, the mimic is acting as itself for the most part, as like the tiger.
Yes.
I it's hard to say because like there's also the issue of GGY being Doctor Rabbit or whatever. Uh, but like it's just intriguing. Um, but yeah, I think it could be a case where Tails and Frights are in the same continuity. I personally don't think it really matters, and if they are, I will be even more against Tails games than I currently am.
Yeah.
Um, I did mention this idea in my video on the whole Eleanor situation because I'm like, okay, either way, regardless of whether Tails and Frights are in the same continuity, you've got Eleanor and Frights, and she's brought up in Tails, which implies that Scott's thinking about her at the very least, even which means maybe she will be in the games. Maybe she's Mrs. Afton. Was the sort of the
Yes.
general thought process. Like, there's lots of similarities between like looks sort of like Circus Baby, but not. Looks has names similar to Elizabeth, but not. William seems to be emotionally attached. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that if Scott confirms the books aren't canon, I would see that as much stronger evidence that Tales and Frights are connected. But
Yeah.
without knowing that, it sort of seems like drawing connections that are only minimally there because you're trying to prove a secondary point.
Yeah, like if regardless of the theory, it doesn't really change my thoughts on the books. Unless it is the case, and it would change uh, my thoughts a little bit on Tales, but in the direction the people who
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 believe it
want
don't want you to.
who want it to be the case for the sake of Frights games, they would not like the way it would actually impact my opinion on Tales. So
Yes. It makes Tales less likely if it's connected to Frights than it does make Frights more likely if it's connected to Tales.
yes.
Oh.
Unless Scott says they're both in the game continuity, in which case I will side-eye him incredibly hard.
I will start a new career. No.
I
And
will become a Pokemon YouTuber.
yes. I'll go full Star Wars. Um, second book question, and I think this is probably the last question I have. What is your opinion on the Choose Your Own Adventure novels? Do you think they're canon, and why or why not?
I think the week before is game continuity. I think there are like some minor things that are going to be a little funky. Just like and with Choose Your Own Adventure books, it's also harder to make sure everything's cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really fault them too much on that. But I do think the general stuff of like, okay, phone guy is Ralph. He's got a daughter. This is what basically happened in the lead up. It's hard to say what exactly happened because it's Choose Your Own Adventure. But we've got the general gist of the path that things have to take. Um, I think that like the general like stuff of the week before is in the game continuity. I'm more on the fence with the other stuff because they're kind of like I could see them maybe being game continuity, but also Return to the Pit is weird, and I'm pretty sure I don't remember all of the details. I'm pretty sure there was some stuff in some of them where I'm like, what? But, huh?
In VIP
I
and
do think Return
Escape.
to the Pit is much more likely to be game continuity than either of the others Into the Pits.
Mm-hmm.
Because at least there are only 5 dead kids, not 6.
Yes. Sorry, Andrew.
Yes. But other than that, I'm just like, I have them in a sort of nebulous state because they don't really matter that much anyway.
Well, do you think that...
Except for the week before, because I like it and it is actually relevant to the games.
Yeah, the week...
And the
First
others
of
are
all,
sort of relevant, like with the Cassie Gregory thing, but like that's one where I'm like, Cassie, how are you not at all suspicious?
yes, I also... First of all, the week before is the peak before. Secondly,
So
the...
true. Best FNAF book.
if
Phone Guy, my beloved.
Escape the Pizzaplex is games canon, which I do think it is, it just makes Cassie's story in Ruin so much more confusing, because, like, the last time that she theoretically saw Gregory, he was just being the worst to her, and she almost died, and she had to do all this stuff to fight him out and escape. And then, what, a few weeks or months later, she gets a recording from him saying, "I'm trapped under the Pizzaplex, come save me," and she does it?
Yeah. That's I'm just sitting there like, what?
Yeah, like, this kind of prequel story should be showing us why Cassie and Gregory are such good friends, so that we find out why she's willing to risk her life for him in Ruin. Instead, it's the opposite.
Yeah. And like that's why I sort of think like, okay, like yeah, this would be during the time that Gregory's patient 46, but like yeah, they need to be friends somehow. It's just weird. It's just weird.
So, would you not be partial to the game theory that the reagent confirms that the nurse during Fall Fest is William's accomplice? Did you watch that video?
The what? I did not.
Oh my
What?
gosh. Okay, newest game theory video.
Okay.
I'm gonna butcher the evidence, but they basically asked, what is the point of the reagent? Why is he in the lore? What was Scott trying to say with him? And they tied him to the nurse character that we've been seeing, like Carnival Nurse, and then the nurse character that we've been seeing in the Secret of the Mimic trailers, and basically
Okay.
said that they think that he's out there, like, trying to kidnap kids to get remnant. And so, what if the role of the nurse during Fall Fest was to administer chemicals to kids to try to get remnant from them?
I find that very unlikely.
I think most other FNAF YouTubers do as well, at least the ones I've spoken to.
I mean, like, I'm not going to say don't throw out ideas because,
Yeah, yeah.
like, I think it's good when even people throw out like absolute insanity because at least it gets people talking.
Yeah, and those are my
But I would be
favorite
very
ones to
surprised
make.
if that was the case.
Yes. My favorite ones to make are the, this is complete nonsense, but technically it's in the game, let's ask why.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't know, I'm just surprised you didn't watch a game theory episode.
I don't always watch. I don't always have time to watch them anymore. And
Fair.
also, like, I don't want to like have an idea and I'm like, I'm gonna make a video, and then I watch theirs and I'm like, dang it, they already made it, or they did something too similar and people are gonna say I'm copying, or I strongly disagree with this and I'm going to be stressed trying to think that I need to make a rebuttal or something.
That's a very fair and I think level-headed perspective to have.
Thanks.
All right, well,
Yeah.
do you have any I did Wither Turkle wanted me to ask you if you would deny, sorry, would you believe TalesGames if it wasn't for all the contradictions? But I think this conversation has basically said that the contradictions are a very big deal for
The
you.
contradictions are the point.
Yes. So I don't really think that that question can have an answer. Do you have
Yeah, like if there weren't contradictions, we would not be having this discussion.
do you have any questions that, like, you would ask a person who believes TalesGames to be like, here's how you can see it my way, like, question this bias that you have, like, what would you want them to ask themselves to maybe see things your way?
Ooh. Would it be better to ignore the contradictions and that are just issues for your theory, or to actually find the answer?
That's a great question, because I think a lot of people are tied to their sort of preconceived notions. So last week, sort of related, last week, a couple of the smaller FNAF YouTubers found evidence that the Funtime animatronics probably killed a bunch of kids before Sister Location.
That checks out.
It checks out, and it's very obviously what the game is trying to say, but I think when most
Yeah.
people make their timelines, they just skip over that because it's messy. Like, people only want there to be the MCI kids. And so to say, oh, it's possible that like 50 kids from one town all got snatched by the Funtimes over the years, it sort of just makes the plot a lot like less believable or more silly. You know, dead kids makes the plot more silly. It just makes it less believable that none of this would have been tied to William earlier, etc. And so I've seen a lot of people who are like, I'm going to ignore this evidence because I don't like it.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to not do that.
Yeah, like if the way to account for contradictions, like is it actually like you can't just write off things as unintentional just because it contradicts your own thoughts.
Yes, or your own preferences, etc.
Yeah. And like I have to do this with my own stuff all the time. Like I can't say, "Oh yes, 100% Charlie died before the MCI," because we've got there are people who have evidence for the other things and I don't weigh that evidence as heavily and I interpret it differently, but like it's there and I have to be aware of it and account for it, and I can't just say, "Oh, that doesn't matter, that was a mistake."
Yes, it all needs to be weighed, and you can come to your conclusion and you can be confident with it and you can state it with confidence, right? This is something I think YouTubers, there's a balance toward stating your conclusion with confidence and just asserting that you are correct.
Yes.
I think there's a very important, delicate balance there. But yeah, no, I think it's important to weigh all of the evidence in a way that makes sense to you when you're coming to your conclusion.
Yep.
All right. Well, do you have any last things to say to the fine people watching at home, all 215 of them?
Don't get stabbed and have a nice day.
You said the thing. Oh my god. Yes. All right, and I'm going to tell everyone to remember to be Freddy, which is that friendly, respectful engagement, discussion, discourse yields success. That's the point of this show. That's going to be the point of any future episodes I do. If you guys have any topics you'd like me to find people to discuss with, you can let me know in the comments. Or you could always ask me on Twitter or under any of my other videos. So make sure that you subscribe to me. Make sure you subscribe to ID's Fantasy. And I will be, when Secret of the Mimic comes out, I'm going to be releasing Let's Plays of it. I'm not streaming it, but I know a lot of other people will be.
I'm planning to stream it right now, I think.
Your
Well,
current...
not like now, but
right
I'm
this second.
planning to stream it. I have the game, guys. No, I think I'm going to stream it, even though I was originally thinking I wouldn't.
Are you going to do like 12:01 a.m. start streaming, or just like sometime?
As soon as I get it downloaded.
Oh, heck yeah. All right, well, I will see everyone later. Captain, Hyperdroid, Nobody, Omnisote, Mr. Cheese, see all you guys next time.